This video is sponsored by Frag Pro Shooter. When traveler George Psalmanazar arrived in London in 1704, claiming to be a native of the island of Taiwan, no one could dispute him, because no one else had ever set foot there. He brought with him fantastic stories, exotic foods, and languages no one had ever heard before. This is the mystery that surrounded the first time that Europe took a peek into the culture of a land a world away, and the story of a man known only by his adopted European name. And when the world discovered his secret, nothing would be the same again. If you like today's episode and want updates whenever I post, make sure to hit subscribe. Sharing this video is also a big help for us, and we really appreciate sending it to your friends. We begin in Strnetsa, the capital city of Formosa, the European name for Taiwan at the time, where a young Psalmanazar lives with his father. A Japanese man only known by the name of D-Road has just arrived in the city. Psalmanazar's father, upon running into D-Road, learned that the man was a tutor of Latin, and seeing a benefit to his son learning the language, hired him.
Brew, 你真的乱说了啦. I'm pretty sure that D-Road is not a Japanese name. Neither is George Psalmanazar a Taiwanese name for that matter.
Just you wait. Wink.
You know you're not supposed to say wink.
I say it every time. D-Road came to live with Psalmanazar and his father for a number of years, teaching the young man Latin. The two were inseparable, save for when George went to temples, as D-Road felt it improper to intrude since he was of a different religion. Psalmanazar even said in his memoirs that he loved him almost as well as his own father, but soon he would learn the truth. D-Road extolled the excitement and adventure of travel, and since Psalmanazar was just a young man of 19, now being regaled with tales of foreign countries and exotic religions, made up his mind to accompany his mentor back to his home country. The tutor refused at first, but as Psalmanazar said, "After he had inflamed my desire, this seeming refusal did rather irritate than extinguish my curiosity." The boy would not be dissuaded, so the two came up with a plan. Psalmanazar would keep his decision to leave a secret from his father, and, on the night of their escape, would steal a great deal of gold from his father's estate to fund their voyage. The day came, they hired a ship, and set sail. After 6 weeks at sea, the duo arrived in Gibraltar. They continued on into France, where they traveled to the Avignon Jesuit monastery. Curiously, the employees at this monastery already knew D-Road, and spoke to him in fluent French. Psalmanazar was floored. D-Road, the Japanese Latin tutor, was in fact Father D-Road, a French Jesuit. Psalmanazar had been lied to, kidnapped. D-Road offered Psalmanazar to convert him to Catholicism and live his life as a member of the church in Avignon, or he could leave and wander alone in a country thousands of miles from his home and his people. Psalmanazar couldn't go home and face his father, and the conversation left a foul taste in his mouth. He quickly made his escape from Avignon and made his way north to Cologne. He was captured there and pressured into military service. While in the army, his superiors attempted to convert him to Calvinism. Psalmanazar wasn't interested until they marched further north into Holland, where he met a longtime friend-to-be, Alexander Innes. Innes was a Scottish Anglican chaplain who, like pretty much every other religious authority at the time, saw Psalmanazar as a pagan heathen who, if he would be converted, would bring respect to his church. He gave Psalmanazar gifts of cash and argued that his church was better than the church that kidnapped him.
Which isn't a very high bar, let's be perfectly honest.
Certainly not.
All right.
As I was saying...
Woo! Yeah, get some.
Grill, what are you doing?
Playing this video's sponsor, Frag Pro Shooter, on my phone. Check it out. I've put together a crack team from the game's 90+ characters to take down anyone foolish enough to stand between me and victory. My star player? My girl Jet here takes to the skies and rains down doom upon my foes. More than that, I've expertly crafted my deck of characters to move in and blast my opponent's side of the battlefield apart bunker by bunker, while keeping my bunkers nice and defended. or blast through the frantic action of the new payload mode to get my card to the middle of the field first. Either way, they're carrying me to victory. Especially Longshot. I got him sitting back, playing patient, making sure the other team doesn't get too close to me. And they're adding new characters all the time. Like this season's newest addition, Red Shadow. He's got a freaking laser sword that he can throw around like a boomerang to cut your foes apart. But wait, it gets better. I've been playing this game for months and I haven't spent a single penny. I get my goods the old-fashioned way, with hard work. But you can get ahead real easy. That's right, free rewards that you can only claim thanks to the link we have in the description. And the best news yet? Unlike those other games who don't care one bit about the loyal players, you can cash in these rewards even if you've already been playing the game. Frag Pro Shooter. Show me what you got, cowards.
As I was saying, when Innes offered to get Psalmanazar out of the military and take him to London, he accepted without a second thought. After they arrived in England in 1703, Alexander wasted no time in baptizing his new ward, asking his friend George Louder to accept the role of godfather for the baptism, prompting Psalmanazar to take the man's name for his own.
Wait, what was his name before his baptism?
We don't know. Most of this info comes from Psalmanazar's own autobiography, but there are no references to his name before this. He calls himself George the whole time. He then became a living legend in England and beyond. For English Protestants, his story fed right into their prejudices about the corrupt Catholics on the mainland, and they loved that he converted to their religion and not others. He was even asked to debate with a prominent English Jesuit on their knowledge of the island of Formosa. The Jesuits, in an effort to discredit him, argued that he was using English prejudice to get famous. They lost, however, and Psalmanazar won himself some wealthy patrons who asked him to teach a class on the Formosan language at the best university in the world at the time, Oxford. He did them the favor of archiving the Formosan language and translated a handful of prayers for them as well. Those who took his class, however, learned more about the customs and traditions of Formosa than the language, but that bothered people little. At the same time he was teaching, he wrote a nearly 250-page book concerning the government and culture of Formosa. In it, he described that the common Formosan man wore nothing but bearskins on their shoulders and underwear made out of brass or seashells, while their sons would usually wear absolutely nothing, save for a scarf over their right shoulder. He wrote that Formosa was home to lions, tigers, wolves, and apes. However, he was very specific, saying that the Formosans know nothing of dragons or land unicorns. Only they have a fish that has one horn, and they never saw any griffins.
Oh, thank God he told us about the griffins.
Psalmanazar even laid out the burial rites of his people for his English audience. After death, a body is laid to rest for 32 hours before it is anointed in oil. After that, the body is placed in a coffin, and the coffin is laid on a table. Then, they put out a bunch of meat and have a big feast right next to the body. Psalmanazar was also seen only eating raw vegetables and meat heavily spiced with pepper and salt. He also claimed that the Formosan people had no reservations against cannibalism as an expensive and tasty delicacy, but assured his English compatriots that he'd refrain, saying doing so would be rude in European culture. But the most salacious detail that he gave his English audience was a description of the Formosan New Year celebrations, in which he writes that, "At this festival, ye shall sacrifice every year the hearts of 18,000 young boys under the age of 9 years. He also writes that the Formosan god, to whom they pray out of fear, ask them to build him a temple, and in that they should make him a tabernacle and an altar, and upon the altar they should burn 20,000 hearts of young children under 9 years of age."
That can't possibly be true. I've been to Taiwan, and this all sounds like some hooey to me.
Hooey is the perfect word, for after Psalmanazar experienced a severe illness in his old age, he wrote his last will and testament. In that document, he admitted that he created a base and shameful imposture of passing upon the world for a native of Formosa, and backed it up with a fictitious account of that island and of my own travels, all or most of it hatched in my own brain, without regard to truth and honesty.
So he was a liar?
He was, by many accounts, the most prolific liar anyone had ever known. If Psalmanazar's autobiography is to be, believed, then everything up to his entry into military service in Cologne was a lie. His real history starts in the early 1680s in southern France. He was from an impoverished family and was educated at a free religious school. His father had to move away to Germany for work, so he lived mostly with his mother. Eventually, he went to a Jesuit college, but his education suffered for it. He eventually went to a university run by Dominican monks, but he hated it and soon dropped out. On his way home, however, he got a fresh idea. Rome was on the way to his hometown. He'd observed that pilgrims were constantly getting free stuff like food and lodging from pious families en route to the Vatican. So he thought it wouldn't be such a big deal if he claimed to be an Irish pilgrim to get some food here and there, right? The only problem was that people in France had actually met Irish people, and he didn't speak Gaelic, so he wouldn't make a convincing Irishman. So he cooked up a new identity. He would pick a country that no one knew enough about to prove that he was lying. Somewhere that went along with Europe's exotic and savage concepts of the foreign countries. It wasn't long until people started noticing the holes in Psalmanazar's story. Among his friends, the man began to divulge the truth of his history. Although he maintained his public persona as Formosan, there was no shoe dropping, no final expose, no great reveal. Like many viral sensations in our day and age, his 15 minutes of fame were up, and his name faded from gossip circles. Psalmanazar lived on his pension paid by his admirers for most of his life. To his deathbed, he refused to tell anyone his real name, fearing that it would bring shame to his family. Even after his autobiography was published after his death, those questions remained unanswered. It was clear that Psalmanazar regretted the fraudulent life he'd spent so many years living. He went so far as to title his will, "The Last Will and Testament of Me, a poor, sinful, and worthless creature, commonly known by the assumed name of George Psalmanazar." In his will, he proclaims he is undeserving of a fine funeral and asks only to be buried in the cheapest coffin available, in an obscure corner of a forgotten cemetery, with the top off, so his body would be exposed to the elements.
He sounds like he actually feels bad about it.
You know, I'm inclined to believe him. Psalmanazar was, by most accounts from the time, a pretty nice guy. Save for the lying and the total disregard for foreign cultures. Over his time in London, he became friends with prominent English poet Samuel Johnson, who said after his death that Psalmanazar was the best man I ever knew. It seems absurd to us today that anyone would have believed that a man the Royal Society said looked like a young Dutchman could ever pass for a native of Taiwan.
It's so absurd that it's almost offensive.
Today, we're only just starting to contend with the stereotypes that Psalmanazar used to gain the trust of his audience. He knew full well that he didn't need to be authentic. He needed to be what was expected. He knew that his English audience didn't like Catholics, so he invented a story where Catholics kidnapped him. He knew that his English audience thought Asian peoples were savage, so he told outlandish and violent stories about them. He knew that if he told them what they wanted to hear and showed them what they wanted to see, that they would believe him, even when they had the truth right there before their eyes. It just goes to show that we should be critical not only of the things we disagree with, especially when it sounds like we're being told what we want to hear.